In the contemporary exploration of human consciousness, the concept that some individuals might operate without what we traditionally define as true consciousness has sparked deep curiosity and debate across various fields such as neuroscience, psychology, philosophy, and even speculative science. The phrase bio-robots among us evokes a powerful metaphor. Living beings who, despite possessing biological bodies indistinguishable from others, seem to lack the genuine self-awareness, intentionality, or subjective experience that characterize conscious life. This discussion challenges our understanding of what it means to be truly conscious and probes the boundaries between mechanistic behavior and sentient awareness. At the core of this inquiry is the nature of consciousness itself. Consciousness is often described as the state of being aware of and able to think about oneself and the environment. It involves subjective experiences, feelings, intentions, and a continuous narrative selfhood. Yet, neuroscience has revealed that much of human behavior is driven by unconscious processes, automatic reactions, ingrained habits, and conditioned responses that function without direct awareness. This raises the question, to what extent are people truly conscious agents? And when do they merely operate as complex biomachines responding to stimuli without real insight or intentionality? The metaphor of biorobots highlights individuals who behave in a highly programmed, reactive, and unreflective manner, as if their actions are pre-coded responses rather than conscious choices. Such individuals may show limited capacity for critical thinking, empathy, or creativity, instead functioning within narrow behavioral patterns shaped by external influences, such as cultural conditioning, social programming, or even manipulation through media and technology. This mechanistic mode of being reduces human experience to automated functioning, similar to robots executing preset instructions. From a psychological standpoint, certain states and conditions demonstrate how human consciousness can become fragmented or diminished. For example, dissociative disorders reveal how parts of the self can become disconnected from awareness, leading to episodes where individuals act without conscious recognition of their own behaviors. Similarly, automatism in neurology, such as in seizures or sleepwalking, shows how complex actions can be performed without conscious intent. These clinical phenomena underline that consciousness is not an all-or-nothing attribute, but a spectrum where true self-awareness can wax and wane. Moreover, societal and technological factors have contributed to an environment conducive to biorobotic behavior. In an age dominated by digital media, social networks, and algorithmic influence, many people become passive recipients of curated information streams. Their beliefs, desires, and even emotions can be externally shaped by targeted content, advertising, and propaganda. The constant bombardment of data and distraction weakens reflective thought and encourages automatic, habitual consumption and reaction, hallmarks of robotic behavior. Another dimension to this discussion involves the evolution of artificial intelligence and the blurring lines between human and machine. As AI systems become more integrated into everyday life, assisting or even replacing human decision-making in some contexts, the risk emerges that humans themselves may adopt more mechanistic cognitive modes to interface effectively with these systems. The adoption of routine, efficiency-driven mental habits can suppress spontaneous creativity, critical reflection, and emotional richness, again pushing individuals closer to biorobotic functioning. Philosophically, the question also touches on free will and agency. If individuals are shaped by forces beyond their conscious control, genetics, environment, subconscious programming, how much of their behavior can truly be attributed to autonomous consciousness? Are some people effectively biorobots, executing complex but predetermined patterns of thought and action without real freedom or awareness? This challenges deep-seated notions about human dignity and moral responsibility. Some theories propose that true consciousness requires a certain threshold of integrated brain activity, a complex dynamic that cannot be reduced to isolated processes. When brain functions fall below this integration, for example, through trauma, chemical imbalance, or repetitive conditioning. Individuals might operate with diminished consciousness, closer to robotic automatons than fully aware beings. This view suggests that certain bio-robotic individuals are not fundamentally different biologically, but suffer from impairments or alterations in their conscious processing. In spiritual and metaphysical frameworks, the lack of true consciousness in some people is sometimes interpreted as a disconnection from a higher self or universal awareness. This perspective sees biorobots as souls trapped in mechanical cycles, unable to awaken to deeper existential realities. Practices such as meditation, mindfulness, or other transformative disciplines aim to break the programming and restore authentic consciousness. The consequences of widespread biorobotic behavior in society are profound. When large populations function on limited awareness, conforming unthinkingly to external agendas, the potential for manipulation, authoritarian control, and cultural stagnation increases dramatically. The survival of vibrant, creative, and autonomous human communities depends on fostering genuine consciousness, encouraging critical thought, self-reflection, emotional intelligence, and ethical engagement. In conclusion, the metaphor of biorobots among us is a powerful lens for examining the boundaries and quality of human consciousness today. It invites us to consider how much of our own daily behavior is truly conscious versus automatic, and how societal, technological, psychological, and biological factors contribute to this balance. By understanding and addressing the conditions that produce biorobotic tendencies, we may rekindle the authentic flame of consciousness in ourselves and others, preserving the essence of what it means to be truly human. As we delve deeper into the concept of biorobots and diminished consciousness, it becomes crucial to examine the mechanisms and influences that lead to such states. Human consciousness is a complex emergent property of neural networks, shaped by genetics, environment, experience, and cultural context. Yet, within this complexity, patterns emerge where certain individuals exhibit behaviors and cognitive functions that seem heavily constrained, predictable, and unreflective, hallmarks of what might be called biorobotic functioning. One fundamental aspect to consider is the role of conditioning throughout human development. From early childhood, individuals are immersed in cultural norms, social expectations, educational systems, and familial influences that shape their thought patterns and behaviors. While some level of conditioning is necessary for social cohesion and learning, excessive or rigid programming can suppress independent thought and self-awareness. For example, children raised in highly authoritarian environments may develop a mindset oriented toward obedience and conformity rather than exploration and critical questioning. Over time, such conditioning can hardwire neural pathways that favor automatic responses over reflective ones. Another contributing factor is media consumption and digital technology usage in the modern age. The proliferation of smartphones, social media platforms, and personalized content feeds creates echo chambers and feedback loops that reinforce existing beliefs and limit exposure to diverse perspectives. Algorithms designed to maximize engagement often prioritize sensational, emotionally charged, or simplistic content, reducing opportunities for nuanced thought. As individuals spend more time in these digital environments, their cognitive patterns can shift towards surface-level processing, distraction, and impulsive reactions, behaviors resembling robotic automation more than mindful engagement. Neurologically, studies have shown that repetitive behaviors and habitual thought processes can lead to neuroplastic changes that reinforce certain brain circuits while neglecting others. This selective strengthening can result in cognitive rigidity, where individuals find it difficult to adapt to new information or challenge their own assumptions. In this state, much of behavior becomes habitual, almost mechanical, akin to a robot executing pre-programmed commands without conscious intervention. Certain psychological phenomena further illustrate how consciousness can be diminished or fragmented. Disorders such as depersonalization or derealization involve feelings of detachment from the self or surroundings, producing an experience where individuals feel like automatons or spectators rather than active agents. Similarly, chronic stress, trauma, or prolonged emotional suppression can impair higher-order cognitive functions and emotional awareness, pushing people toward survival modes dominated by reactive and unconscious processes. In the broader societal context, the concept of biorobots also relates to the increasing mechanization and bureaucratization of human life. Many people find themselves trapped in routines dictated by work schedules, social roles, and consumer habits, leaving little room for spontaneity, creativity, or self-reflection. This routinization can dull the mind and spirit, encouraging a state of functional automatism where individuals go through the motions without truly living consciously. Philosophers and cognitive scientists have long debated the nature of free will and its relation to consciousness. Some argue that true conscious agency requires the capacity to reflect upon one's desires, beliefs, and intentions, and to act according to reasoned choice rather than impulse or external compulsion. From this perspective, biorobots lack the internal deliberation that characterizes genuine freedom and moral responsibility, making them effectively automatons shaped by forces beyond their control. Another intriguing aspect is the possibility of neurological or biochemical alterations contributing to biorobotic states. For instance, neurodegenerative diseases, substance abuse, or certain medications can impair consciousness, reducing emotional responsiveness, critical thinking, and self-awareness. Even in healthy individuals, factors like sleep deprivation or chronic inflammation can temporarily dull cognitive functions, suggesting that consciousness is vulnerable to physiological conditions. On a speculative frontier, some theories posit that a portion of humanity may be influenced or controlled by external entities or forces, whether technological, extraterrestrial, or metaphysical. While controversial, such ideas resonate with the biorobot metaphor by suggesting that some people might be manipulated to act as unthinking agents serving hidden agendas, devoid of authentic consciousness. Whether literal or symbolic, this viewpoint reflects anxieties about loss of autonomy and the dehumanizing effects of modern systems. In contrast, practices aimed at awakening or enhancing consciousness highlight the dynamic nature of human awareness. Meditation, mindfulness, psychoactive substances, and psychotherapy can help individuals break free from habitual, robot-like patterns and access deeper layers of self-awareness and presence. These methods suggest that biorobotic states are not fixed destinies, but conditions that can be transformed through intentional effort and environmental support. The ethical implications of recognizing biorobotic tendencies in individuals and societies are profound. It challenges us to consider how to nurture environments that promote conscious agency, creativity, and emotional intelligence rather than conformity and passivity. Education systems, workplaces, and communities might need to prioritize critical thinking, emotional learning, and self-reflection to counteract the drift toward automated, unreflective existence. In summary, the presence of biorobots among us is a metaphorical but meaningful way to describe individuals or populations exhibiting diminished or absent true consciousness. This condition arises from a complex interplay of developmental, neurological, psychological, social, and technological factors that favor automatic, programmed behaviors over reflective, autonomous awareness. Recognizing and addressing these influences is essential for fostering a more conscious, free, and humane world. To deepen our understanding of how biorobotic patterns emerge, it is essential to consider the role of identity construction in modern life. From early childhood, people absorb countless signals from family, peers, institutions, and media about who they are supposed to be. This process of socialization helps form identity structures, which often serve as adaptive mechanisms to navigate expectations and maintain social belonging. However, when these identities become rigid and over-identified with external labels, nationality, profession, ideology, they can act as mental programs, reducing a person's flexibility, curiosity, and authentic presence. When a person's sense of self is based almost entirely on external validation or socially imposed roles, their thoughts and reactions tend to follow predictable scripts. They respond to challenges by clinging to slogans, stereotypes, or groupthink rather than engaging in real reflection or inquiry. Over time, this dependency on pre-packaged narratives creates a mechanical way of being. Such individuals may never question their core assumptions because doing so feels too threatening to the fragile sense of self that has been constructed. This reliance on external identity markers can be seen as another form of bio-robotic functioning, a life lived reactively rather than consciously. Further complicating this picture is the rise of algorithmic influence. The proliferation of recommendation systems on social media, streaming platforms, and online stores subtly conditions users to consume predictable content. Over time, these algorithms learn to anticipate and reinforce habitual preferences, creating a self-reinforcing feedback loop. What starts as convenience becomes a form of soft behavioral conditioning. People increasingly find themselves scrolling through curated feeds, absorbing ideas, images, and emotional triggers without conscious filtering or critical analysis. This algorithmic shaping of consciousness contributes to what some philosophers call the erosion of interiority. Instead of cultivating a rich inner life, many individuals experience their awareness as fragmented and shallow, jumping from one dopamine-triggering stimulus to the next. They may confuse information consumption with knowledge or reaction with reflection. As this tendency deepens, the capacity to sustain attention, empathize, or explore complexity weakens. The resulting state of mind is highly programmable, passively receptive to suggestion, a bio-robotic consciousness susceptible to manipulation. Neuroscientific research has demonstrated that prolonged engagement with hyperstimulating digital environments can alter brain structures involved in attention regulation and impulse control. The prefrontal cortex, critical for executive functions and self-awareness, can become less active when overstimulated by novelty and instant rewards. Meanwhile, the limbic system, which governs emotional reactivity, grows dominant, encouraging rapid, instinctive responses rather than deliberate thought. This imbalance promotes precisely the kind of automated behavior the bio-robot metaphor describes. The question arises whether such individuals can meaningfully reclaim agency over their own minds. The answer seems to depend on the interplay of personal choice, supportive environments, and access to practices that restore reflective capacities. For example, many contemplative traditions have long emphasized the importance of disrupting habitual mental patterns through silence, retreat, and introspection. When external input is limited, individuals often rediscover a deeper current of consciousness, one not driven by programming, but by authentic presence and inquiry. In addition to psychological and technological factors, economic pressures also play a decisive role in bio-robotic tendencies. The rise of precarious work, gig economies, and constant productivity demands traps many people in cycles of survival anxiety. When individuals are consumed by fear of not meeting material needs, their cognitive and emotional bandwidth shrinks. Survival priorities override reflection and self-knowledge. A person driven solely by economic survival behaves in predictable, reactive ways, further eroding the space in which consciousness might otherwise flourish. This environment is reinforced by consumerist ideologies that equate worth with external success and perpetual consumption. Advertising constantly tells people what to desire, fear, or admire. Every product promises a shortcut to happiness or status. Over time, this bombardment of suggestion creates a template for automatic desire, an endless pursuit of novelty and validation. People become conditioned to believe their lives are only meaningful if they acquire certain symbols of success, perform certain roles, and signal belonging to certain tribes. The result is a life lived in service of program drives rather than authentic purpose. Another facet worth exploring is the psychological phenomenon of learned helplessness. When individuals repeatedly encounter situations where their actions seem to have no effect, be it in dysfunctional families, rigid bureaucracies, or oppressive societies, they may develop a profound sense of futility. Over time, this can manifest as passivity, apathy, and disengagement. Such a mindset resembles robotic compliance, actions reduced to rote execution without hope or initiative. Even when circumstances change, these individuals may remain stuck in default behaviors, unable to reclaim their agency. Social systems often inadvertently encourage such learned helplessness. Educational institutions that prioritize rote memorization over curiosity, workplaces that reward conformity over innovation, and political structures that ignore citizens' voices all foster resignation. The cumulative effect is the normalization of mechanical existence, a life where people feel like parts in a machine rather than conscious participants in their own stories. More unsettling are theories suggesting that some individuals may never develop deep self-reflective awareness at all. Certain interpretations of consciousness research argue that subjective experience requires not only brain complexity, but also sustained developmental conditions, secure attachment, emotional safety, and opportunities for open-ended exploration. When these conditions are absent or severely compromised, the emergent consciousness may remain superficial, limited to immediate sensation and reactive behavior. Such individuals might appear functional and even socially successful, but lack the depth of inner life characteristic of authentic self-awareness. On the more speculative end of the spectrum, some traditions suggest that a percentage of humanity are empty vessels, biological forms animated by basic instincts, but devoid of the spark of reflective spirit or soul. While science does not substantiate this view in literal terms, it captures a common intuition that some people seem unreachably mechanical in their responses, incapable of true empathy, curiosity, or transformation. Whether we frame this as a developmental deficiency, a neurological condition, or a spiritual absence, it underscores the same existential question. What does it mean to be truly alive? This inquiry has practical consequences. If we acknowledge that many people operate primarily as biorobots, it invites us to rethink how we approach social change, education, and personal development. For instance, appeals to reason or morality may fall flat with those whose consciousness is fragmented or dormant. Real transformation may require first awakening a deeper awareness before any external change becomes sustainable. Furthermore, recognizing biorobotic tendencies in ourselves can be profoundly humbling. No one is entirely immune to automation. In moments of stress, fear, or distraction, we all default to habitual responses. The difference lies in whether we can notice these patterns and choose differently. Self-observation, the capacity to witness our thoughts and impulses without immediately identifying with them, is the first step in reclaiming agency. In therapeutic settings, this is often called metacognition, the ability to think about thinking. When individuals learn to see their own mental and emotional processes as objects of awareness rather than absolute truths, the spell of programming begins to loosen. They can pause, reflect, and choose. Without this capacity, life becomes a series of automated reactions to external stimuli, indistinguishable from the behavior of a sophisticated machine. A crucial dimension to consider when examining biorobotic functioning is the impact of trauma and chronic stress on the nervous system. Repeated exposure to overwhelming or chaotic environments can train the brain and body to remain in a state of hypervigilance or numb detachment. In these conditions, individuals often adopt survival strategies that bypass reflective awareness and emotional processing. Instead of consciously engaging with experience, they operate on autopilot, scanning for threat or dissociating from feeling. Over time, this becomes their baseline way of being. This survival-driven automation is not a conscious choice. It is an adaptation. When the mind learns that reflection and feeling are too dangerous because they might trigger shame, terror, or grief, it compartmentalizes awareness and limits curiosity. Such people may appear functional, even outwardly successful, but their inner life is fragmented. They relate to themselves and others through fixed scripts and defensive reactions. Their consciousness is, in many respects, operating like a program, predictable, rigid, and protective rather than alive, fluid, and curious. In relationships, this can manifest as patterns of emotional unavailability or codependence. Bio-robotic individuals may struggle to perceive nuance in other people's feelings or perspectives. Interactions become transactional, an exchange of needs, roles, or validations. Instead of mutual presence, there's a repetition of conditioned responses: the caretaker, the controller, the victim, the rescuer. The authenticity and spontaneity that characterize conscious connection are replaced by automated relational dynamics. Moreover, trauma does not need to be acute to produce such effects. Developmental trauma, including neglect, emotional inconsistency, or chronic criticism, can subtly shape neural pathways over years. The result is often a flattened effect, reduced capacity to feel joy or curiosity, and a pervasive sense of disconnection. These traits can be mistaken for personality, when in fact they are symptoms of a protective adaptation, a way to navigate environments that never felt safe enough to allow openness and vulnerability. From this perspective, biorobotic functioning is often a testament to resilience rather than weakness. It is the psyche's attempt to survive intolerable conditions by simplifying experience into manageable scripts. Yet the tragedy is that this strategy, while effective in protecting the self, also inhibits the development of deeper consciousness. It creates an internal landscape of defended automatism rather than expansive awareness. Modern organizational life reinforces and rewards these patterns. In many workplaces, especially those driven by relentless productivity metrics, employees are expected to prioritize efficiency and output over reflection and authentic engagement. Meetings become ritual performances of consensus. Communication is reduced to transactional exchanges, often mediated by screens and dashboards. Emotional nuance is unwelcome. Curiosity is a liability, and dissent is pathologized. The longer a person remains in such environments, the more their neural circuits adapt to meet the demands of conformity and speed. Over time, they may lose touch with their deeper motivations, creativity, or moral compass. Work becomes not a meaningful expression of self, but a series of tasks executed by a compliant operator. This is the machinery of biorobotic culture, the mass training of humans to behave as predictable units in an economic system that values control over consciousness. Interestingly, the technological metaphors we use to describe people's experiences often reflect this dehumanizing process. Phrases like burnout, shut down, reboot, or running on empty point to the sense that something essential has been hollowed out. What remains is an organism going through motions, a body executing programs in the absence of deep feeling or reflective purpose. This raises the question: is it possible to reawaken consciousness once it has become this mechanized? Evidence suggests that while the process requires intention and often support, recovery of deeper awareness is indeed possible. Practices that interrupt habitual stimuli, such as silent retreats, nature immersion, somatic therapies, and contemplative disciplines, can gradually help resensitize the nervous system and restore the capacity for presence. Yet there is often resistance to this process because stepping out of biorobotic functioning means feeling what has been suppressed: grief, fear, shame, longing. For many, the familiarity of automation feels safer than the vulnerability of consciousness. They would rather remain comfortably numb than confront the unknown terrain of true awareness. This is why some philosophers and spiritual teachers assert that awakening consciousness is not merely an intellectual endeavor, but an existential risk. It requires courage to see oneself clearly, to dismantle internal programs, and to embrace the mystery of unconditioned experience. Those who undertake this journey often describe it as a return to aliveness, a reanimation of perception, emotion, and presence that feels profoundly different from the sleepwalking state of automated existence. At a cultural level, the proliferation of bio-robotic behaviors has profound implications. When a society becomes dominated by individuals operating in automatic scripts, it becomes susceptible to mass manipulation and authoritarian control. History shows that propaganda thrives in populations that have lost the capacity for independent thought. Authoritarian regimes deliberately cultivate conditions of fear, distraction, and conformity precisely because these conditions suppress reflection and empathy. Even in democratic societies, the constant stimulation of consumer culture and the noise of polarized media ecosystems gradually erode the mental habits necessary for civic participation. People become reactive rather than deliberative, tribal rather than empathetic, predictable rather than thoughtful. In this sense, the emergence of bio-robotic culture is not simply a personal issue, but a collective threat to freedom itself. One might wonder whether the advance of artificial intelligence will accelerate or mitigate this trend. Some optimists argue that AI could liberate humans from routine tasks, freeing time and energy for deeper pursuits. But this assumes that people will spontaneously choose reflection over consumption when given the chance. A more sobering possibility is that AI will simply expand the domain of programmed existence, making it easier to outsource decisions, preferences, and even social interactions to algorithmic processes. Already, many people rely on digital assistants to remind them what to do, how to feel, and what to think. The boundary between human and machine blurs as behavior becomes ever more predictable and optimized. In this scenario, bio-robotic functioning is not just an aberration, but the logical endpoint of a culture that prizes efficiency over consciousness. At the same time, awareness of this trajectory can inspire counter-movements. In recent years, there has been a surge of interest in mindfulness, contemplative practices, and regenerative communities that prioritize relational depth and reflective living. These spaces offer a refuge from the noise and a laboratory for rediscovering what it means to be truly conscious. In such environments, individuals often report a startling realization. Much of what they had considered their personality was actually a collection of automated defenses, preferences, and adaptations. When these programs soften, a deeper self emerges, one that is less reactive, more present, and profoundly more alive. This is the essence of the transformation from bio-robot to conscious human, the movement from conditioned automation to liberated awareness.